indestructible. I, the grand dame of cathedrals. But on that day you found out that I was fragile. The time had come for me to tell you my incredible story. My story began in the mid-12th century, in the dreams of the Bishop of Paris, Maurice de Sully. A dream that was both fabulous and impossible.
It will never stand.
But nothing, not even the King of France, had been able to resist the determination of my founder, who in 1163 blessed my first stone.
It will be Notre-Dame Cathedral, Notre-Dame de Paris.
His project exceeded everything that Paris had seen. My builders set to work with the enthusiasm of new beginnings. They had to try, to learn, to improve. For everything had to be invented. Stone after stone, they raised me out of the ground. My construction ate through fortunes and awakened my old enemies.
It's the Holy Bible that you should learn.
But in 20 years, they successfully completed my choir. I cried for my first builders. The hardships piled up, and construction dragged on. Fortunately, other builders took over the reins, and their ambition remained intact. It was they who built my nave, 127 meters long, with its forest of 1,300 beams and its 3 monumental portals, which they decorated with extraordinary sculptures. They painted my facades. But it still wasn't enough. So they disassembled what they had patiently built to raise me even higher, before crowning me with a spire. In 1240, after 80 years of construction, my 2 towers finally rose above Paris. Yet this state of grace was alas short-lived. In the mid-13th century, my story was only beginning. I had just joined the ranks of major cathedrals when a formidable rival came on the scene. A stone's throw from my towers, the Sainte-Chapelle, a masterpiece of virtuosity and elegance. Next to its insolent beauty, all that was marvelous 20 years before now seemed heavy and dark. Would construction have to resume? But where to find the strength to begin again? By chance, another encounter occurred between a young master builder and one of the damask roses brought back from the Orient during the Crusades. All it took was one encounter to start over again. It is the year 1248. Jean de Chelles has decided to exceed the wonders of the Sainte-Chapelle by matching the beauty of that most perfect of creations. Geometry, symmetry. The master builder who takes the reins belongs to a new generation, whose dreams are augmented by science. It enables him to create rose windows of incredible virtuosity for the facades of my transept. The complexity of Jean's drawing of the rose is evident, for it is based on the repetition of the same forms, and hence the same blocks of stone. But what really appealed to the bishop and canons was the size of these rose windows, 13 meters in diameter, the largest in all of Christendom. The 2 facades of my transept had to be entirely disassembled in order to achieve this feat. Jean de Chelles' wager was risky, but Maurice de Sully would have surely taken the risk. But builders builders who could meet this challenge still had to be found, for the times had changed. The architecture initiated a century earlier in Paris had spread to Ile-de-France, where it took on its name, Opus Franciganum, which is to say, the French style. For I was imitated everywhere now, well beyond the kingdom's borders. The major cities of Europe were snatching away French builders. In 100 years, they would transport more stones than ancient Egypt. It may come as a surprise, but it was in the dark heat of the smithy that Jean sought out his first ally. For he knew that stone had exhausted its resources, and nothing spectacular could be accomplished without iron. I need to tell a secret. The beautiful outlines of stone cathedrals are also held up by a corset of metal. Skillfully hidden, a few iron staples, and beneath the lacework of my windows, rods of lead. Imagine the metal armature that had to be forged for the large rose windows. The most renowned masters were all employed at other building sites.
Have you thought about my request?
And Jean had trouble finding his man.
I need your answer.
I accept.
Thank you.
The taciturn smith was young. He had much to prove. But the stained glass would require all the skill of that greatest of masters, the glassmaker of the Sainte-Chapelle. The old man was at the end of his life, withdrawn in his workshop with his daughter. At his age, the adventure was unreasonable. But how to resist?
My daughter will come to Paris to get the designs.
Thank you. It will be a masterpiece.
Jean had rekindled the flame of my building site. After the era of stone and wood, I was now entering that of metal and glass. But had these young builders measured the scope of the task ahead? Not only would they have to compete with nature, but they had to move quickly to catch the other cathedrals unaware. Following Jean's plans, stonecutters chiseled the blocks for the tracery that would hold the immense window. In Lubin's smithy, the craftsmen shaped the iron armatures that will allow the rose window to resist the attacks of the wind. The transept's north facade rises before their eyes. The first panels of glass begin to arrive in Paris. Never had a glassmaker undertaken such a colossal challenge. Each panel had to be drawn first, in full size. Old Testament kings and prophets, dozens of medallions, over 25,000 pieces of multicolored glass. The old master works with the zeal of a man who knows his days are numbered.
Give me the blue paint, please.
Of all the colors, the most precious is a deep blue, the blue of kings and the Virgin Mary. Drawn from cobalt powder, its formula is jealously kept, and its price exorbitant. I would be covered with it. Colored by copper, iron, or manganese, the thousands of panes would be sturdily assembled using lead sticks. The rose windows will have to resist both storms and centuries. When the planes are finished, the glassmaker's daughter escorts them to Paris, where they will be installed. Petal after petal, rose begins to bloom. The night was dangerous during the Middle Ages. When she would come to Paris, the young woman found refuge beneath my vaults, among the infirm and the sick seeking a cure. Beneath the watchful eye of the church warden, the cathedral's police.
Let's go. Guards! This harlot was conjuring up Satan. Beware of her. She's a witch.
What would a young woman's word be against a canon's accusations? Witchcraft was punishable by death. The reputation of the old master didn't change a thing. The tragedy got the better of his fragile health. Thus would end the dream of a rose and the life of a young woman.
Follow me, witch.
The craftsmen were a brotherhood. The young woman was one of theirs. As for the horrible canon, people say he threw himself from my towers out of guilt. Only one thing mattered for my builders: that the return of his daughter would restore the old master's health. But it was too late. I'm here. No matter that glassworking was forbidden to women, like most of the other occupations of the cathedral, the glassmaker's daughter would show the error of this stupid rule. She would learn to paint in gray tones the faces of kings, the folds of their clothes. She had attended the best school. The smith would melt the lead. Together they would finish her father's masterpiece. Their masterpiece. To say that the North Rose is the daughter of love. What grace. In 1250, it begins to radiate its magical light. It is the largest in all of Christendom. 20 years later, the second rose window will bloom on my south facade. A visitor during the Middle Ages described them as so wonderful that the soul cannot help but contemplate them. It is the year 1270. I'm a little over 100 years old, and my construction is about to finish. The time has come to make my voice heard. The bells are bronze giants. The small ones, which people call the sparrows, weigh 500 kilos. A trifle compared to the enormous 10-ton bells that would join them later. So that my stone skeleton can resist their ringing, my builders had the brilliant idea of constructing a belfry. A wooden tower built inside my stone towers. It absorbs their terrible swinging without touching my walls. consecrated, each one christened with a name: Guillaume, Pasquier, Thibault. They will sing in harmony, the sound of the alarm of danger, or the peals of high mass. Parisians will live to the rhythm of my heartbeat. I will sound when it is time to wake up, time to stop work. I will sound the great hours of the history of France. I would like to tell you a beautiful story about a cathedral, loved by the humble, pampered by the powerful. I could boast of the splendor of my choir's great panels, sculpted by the imagier of the 14th century. Notre-Dame, majestic, protective, sailing the stormy seas of history. Centuries later, grateful kings will offer me their infinitely graceful marbles. But all this beauty distracts us from the tragedy that is unfolding. The admiration that once surrounded me has slowly disappeared. In the 16th century, the axe fell. My architecture would henceforth be referred to by a scornful term, Gothic, meaning barbarous and primitive. I would henceforth live in the shadow of other monuments. After the time of cathedrals came the time of palaces. Marvels of the Renaissance in the Loire Valley. They were the builders' new masterpieces. Then it was the majestic symmetry of Versailles, which would outshine me, for good. But in 1789, the French Revolution upset this old world. It brought tremendous hope to the people, but proved a difficult ordeal for monuments. A period of uncertainty began for churches like myself. They started by removing my bells. The young republic needed their bronze to cast cannons. I was forced to open my eyes. I also embodied the past from which the revolution wanted to make a clean break. Even worse, I was linked to the monarchy, to the king who had just been decapitated. In the year 1793, my fate is in the hands of a man named Varron, an entrepreneur who switched to a lucrative sector, destruction. Don't think that I was the victim of blind vandalism. Varron followed a program established in high places. No symbol of the despised time of kings and feudalism must remain. The demolisher provided an estimate. Everything had to be quantified, down to the restoration of the square, which would be damaged by the falling statues. Wise men. Poor Saint Marcel, decapitated like so many others. My persecutors smeared thick black paint on Jean's splendid stained glass windows to eliminate fleur-de-lis and crowns. The art and memory of the Middle Ages was being wiped out beneath Varron's impassive gaze. This grim undertaking took nearly 10 months. For a time, I was transformed into a temple of reason to welcome the new revolutionary religion. But nothing could be done. I no longer had a role. The authorities intervened solely as a matter of public health. The tatters from my gown of stone are sold at auction for a discount to serve as ballast. The buyer's name is Bertrand. He has 24 hours to clear the premises. Sometimes, history plays tricks on us.
Go on. Put some effort into it. We don't have much time.
On that summer night in 1796 in Paris, the courtyard of a private mansion hosted a rather mysterious ceremony.
Go on.
The remains of my statues had ended up in the hands of a fervent loyalist. They made tombs to shelter them from the storms of history. In 1804, I even believed that my past glory had returned, with 15,000 guests for an imperial coronation. For it was I that Napoleon chose to celebrate the ceremony, making him the Emperor of France. On that day, I was the Queen of Cathedrals indeed. But the splendors of my decoration were as fleeting as the Emperor's reign. And with each season, my condition worsened. I was exhausted by the centuries, abandoned, my gown in tatters, my sad lot no longer interested anyone. The return of the kings to the throne didn't change a thing. After all, why would I escape the fate of so many other ancient monuments? Behold, precious Jumièges Abbey. Ruins have a beauty of their own. Like fossils, they harbor within them the memory of their past glory. But the 19th century would not be my grave, because one man rebelled.